We are in Daniel chapter 11 tonight. Daniel chapter 11. This is a big, long chapter. And if you have read it without your eyes going crossed, I commend you. There's a lot here, and it's a lot of information. I was asking the Lord how to approach this, because I can tell you really the first 35 verses of Daniel 11 is a history. It's all history. And it all talks about different things that you can find in history. And then the last verses from 36 on to 45, it's talking about future. And there's reasons why we can know that. I want to tell you that what I did here is I read this chapter, and then I read it again, and then I went and got Mom's notes, and then I read them, and then I started looking up on different places, and it's interesting the things you can find with the internet. And I know you can't believe everything you find, but in something like this, I did some research just looking online, and I found these stories, and they matched Mom's notes, they matched the commentaries that I read, and they matched Daniel 11. They all matched. And it's interesting to be able to read things online. They're encyclopedias that you can find online, and it's historical things that people have written. You can go to Wikipedia, and in Wikipedia they have the source. Well, you go to that source and you find out all kinds of things. And it's interesting to read about things that happened in history and to realize that Daniel wrote it down before it happened. So much so that it's so detailed, this chapter is so detailed, and things have been found precisely what he wrote, that critics of the Bible say that he had to write this later, during the Maccabees' time. There's people that say that they don't believe the Bible, say that Daniel wrote this later. Well, Daniel didn't live later. And so they say that no, Daniel didn't write it. Somebody else did, but they credit it to, no, the Lord wrote this through Daniel, and that's how Daniel knew what to write. So it's a wonderful thing and it's a real interesting thing to look up these things. And I did just a couple. I'm not going to tell you I looked up every one, because I didn't. But I looked up a couple, and it's neat to find those stories. So much so that I am amazed and just blessed again of the authenticity of the Bible and the perfection of the Bible. It's a wonderful thing. Brother Darrell, could you stand and pray for the word tonight, please?
Father, we thank you again for your presence here. We thank you for once here, Lord, that wants to know you. Father, I pray you to bless each heart. Lord, I thank you, Father, that your ways are higher than our ways, Lord. There's nothing, Lord, that anyone can tell you that you don't already know, Lord. Nobody can guide and direct you or do anything, Lord. You are God Almighty, and we thank you, Father, that we can come and have fellowship one with another, but with you, Lord, for that privilege of coming to you. So, Father, as we come, we ask, Lord, that your word will speak to our heart. Give us what is needed, Father. Lord, you have something special for each of us all the time. So we ask, Lord, that you bless us in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. So, Daniel chapter 11, verse 1, it says, "Also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and strengthen him." Now, this is talking about the spiritual warfare that we were talking about last week. Really, I think verse 2 should be verse 1. But anyway, that's talking about chapter 10. In verse 2, it says, "And now will I show thee the truth." So the angel is talking to Daniel and telling him he's going to show him the truth. "Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than they all, and by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. Now these four kings, they are the Cambyses. It's Cambys, and I could give you all the dates, but you're not going to remember them. So I'm going to skip over some of those things. But he reigned from a certain time, and then Pseudo-Smyrtus, Darius the First, that was Darius the Great, and Xerxes, which is Ahasuerus in the book of Esther. That's Xerxes the First, and that's Ahasuerus. And then he would be the richest one. So these are the names of these kings that he's talking about in verse 2. Verse 3, and a mighty king shall stand up and shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. The mighty king that he's talking about is Alexander the Great. And after he died, his kingdom was divided into 4 generals. We've talked about this in the other visions of Daniel. And we're going to talk now about 2 of these generals because they are the ones that relate to Israel. And the 2 that we're going to talk about is Seleucus and Ptolemy. Ptolemy, it's Ptolemy, Ptolemy, and then Seleucus. Ptolemy was the south, or king of Egypt, and Seleucus was Syria, or the north. Verse 4, it says, and when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and he shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others beside those. And that's, again, talking about those kings. Verse 5, and the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. Now I'm going to read to you some things that I found here. It says, the strong king of the south was Ptolemy. Ptolemy the First Soter is his whole name. A general who served under Alexander. He was given authority over Egypt in 323 BC and proclaimed king of Egypt in 304. The commander referred to in verse 5 is Seleucus the First Necatar, also a general under Alexander, who was given authority to rule in Babylon in 321. But in 316, when Babylon came under attack by Antigonus, another general, Seleucus sought help from Ptolemy in Egypt. After his defeat in 312, Seleucus returned to Babylon, greatly strengthened. He ruled over Babylon, Media, and Syria, and assumed the title of king in 305. Thus, Seleucus I Necatar's rule was over far more territory than Ptolemy, than his rule. So we see here how one was greater than the other one, and that's what actually happened. And in the end, verse 6, and in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north, and to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm. Neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up. And they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. Okay. So what do you think happened there? It's a soap opera. And I could read it to you, but I don't like standing up here and reading. I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to tell you what happened is the one king gave his daughter to the other king and forced the other king to marry him. Now, I'm not sure how he forced him to. But in order for the king to marry that girl, he had to divorce his wife. So now he divorced his wife and he married that girl. Well, a few years later, the wife that he divorced killed all of them. Not all at once. in parts. That woman, Bernice, I think was her name, killed everybody, including her ex-husband. So, now let me read it to you again. And in the end of the years they shall join, And in the end of the years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of the arm. Yeah, she gets killed. Neither shall he stand. Yeah, he got killed too. Nor his arm. Yeah, his kids got killed too. But she shall be given up. And they that brought her, and he that beget her, and he that strengthened her in these times. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. And when you read it, you can put these pieces together and see what they're talking about. Verse 7. But out of a branch of her roots. Now, who do you think that would be talking about? A branch of her roots. Her kids or grandkids. And we're talking about different generations here, so it could be grandkids. Shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail, and shall also carry captives into Egypt their gods, with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and of gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. Now, clear until verse 35, we're talking about battles between the north and the south. It's Ptolemy and I can't pronounce his name. Ptolemy and Seleucus. And they all have different names, and it's those families, and it's the first and the second and the third and the fourth and going all the way down. And we're going to come to Antiochus Epiphanes pretty quick. Now, he's not part of the family, but he just took over. So I just read to you how the branch of her roots, and let me tell you what happened. Bernice's brother, Ptolemy the third, succeeded his father and set out to avenge the death of his sister Bernice. So it was not Bernice. Bernice is the one that got killed, not the one that killed. He was victorious over the Syrian army, which is the king of the north, put Laodice, that was the other woman's name, to death, and returned to Egypt with many spoils. So that was the end of what happened in that situation. Any questions? It's history. And if you're interested in it, and it's history that proves the Bible. If you're interested in it, look these things up. It's really cool. It takes some time, but it's fun to do. I'm going to go ahead and read some more. Verse 9. So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom, and shall return into his own land. But his sons shall be stirred up. Now, what do you think is going to happen when his sons get stirred up? They're going to go up to the north, and they're going to wreak havoc. And shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler. Now that's with bitterness. He's angry. And shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. And he shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. And when he hath taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it. In other words, he wins a war, but loses the battle. For the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. So what happened here is they're having battles back and forth, but the north, as of right now, the north wins the end of that battle. The king of the south in this verse was Ptolemy the fourth. He was one of the he was the one driven back by Antiochus the Third, the Great, Antiochus the Great. Let's see. He came to meet Antiochus the Third in the southern borders of Israel. Ptolemy the Fourth was initially successful in delaying the invasion of Antiochus, but after a brief interruption, Antiochus returned with another army, much larger, and turned back the king of the south. So we see what happened. Verse 14, and in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of the people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. Now there's a couple of things here. I did find a variety of things as to what the meaning of the robbers of the people. One thing I found was that this were rebel Jews that would fight against their own people. That's one thing I found. And it says, when it says, shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, I believe that's talking about the vision in chapter 8, because the timeline fits. But they shall fall. To the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand. Neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. What do you think the glorious land is? That's Israel, yes. Verse 7.
This is the fourth, you said?
It was Ptolemy the Fourth and Antiochus the Third. That was back through verse 13. And we're even further than that now. And in fact, we're going to stand up. We're going to see, I read stand up. We're going to see here, starting in verse 21, that it's talking about Antiochus Epiphanes. And the way, it was interesting, he wasn't in the families, but he just weaseled his way in. And with flattery, and he set himself up to be king, and then he won a battle that protected the city, and so they accepted him as king. And the other king, the other part of the country, was an infant, and so he just killed him. And that's how Antiochus Epiphanes got started. Let's see. Verse 17. He shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her, but she shall not stand on his side, neither be for him. After this shall he turn his face unto the isles, and shall take many. But a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Without his own reproach he shall cause it to turn upon him. Then he shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, and he shall stumble and fall and not be found. Then shall stand up in his estates a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. This raiser of taxes, what was happening is the kingdom was being charged a bunch of money, and so he raised the taxes from all the people to pay that. And you can find that in history. I forget the names of it all, but you can find those things in history. Verse 21, and his estate shall stand up a vile person. Now, we know from other writings and other things, who is this vile person? That's Antiochus Epiphanes. And he was known to be especially vile and harsh on the Jews. To whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. And that's how Antiochus Epiphanes gained the kingdom. And with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. Now, and after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. That's what he did. He went into this one part of the kingdom and he defended them and won that battle, and then they started giving him allegiance. He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey and spoil and riches, yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south. First of all, in verse 24, what Antiochus Epiphanes did to gain a lot of notoriety was he would steal from the rich people, he would take from the rich and give it to anyone who would follow him. And so the poor people would follow him, and so he was doing like Robin Hood. He was stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. And he won great favor with them by doing this. And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. Yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper. For yet the end shall be at the time appointed. The time appointed. Who appoints time? So what does this tell you? God is in control. He's allowing these kings to do all kinds of crazy things, but God is in control. I like phrases like that because the time appointed shows you that God is in control. Then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits and return to his own lands. His heart shall be against the holy covenant. That would be God's law, the Mosaic ways. That's what he is against. Let's see. At the time appointed, there is another one of those phrases. He shall return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. For the ships of Shittim shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return. Now this is Rome. Rome came again. Antiochus was getting ready to invade Egypt. And Rome came against him and said, no, you can't do that. And that's what this is talking about. He shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So on his way back, he was cut off. He couldn't go invade Egypt. So on his way back, he took his frustration out on Israel. And that's what it's talking about in verse 30, against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. In other words, there were people, there was a remnant in Israel that did not go the way Antiochus. There's a whole big story about what he did, and I'll tell you what that was in just a moment. But there was a group of people that would not do what Antiochus wanted them to do. That's the remnant. That's the Jews that were following God's law. But he was finding out who they were and having them killed. An arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate, and such as do wickedly against the covenant, that's against God's law, shall he corrupt by flatteries. But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword and by the flame, by captivity and by spoil many days. What happened is he put up a statue of Zeus in the temple, and he offered a pig there. And then he made the Jews start offering pigs. His birthday was on the 25th of some month. And so every month on the 25th, they had to offer pigs in the temple. And that went completely, totally against everything that they believed. And this was just some of the things. He stopped circumcision. He would not allow them to circumcise the males. He stopped all of their feasts and all of their things that they did under the Mosaic law. He stopped all of that. He would not allow them to do those things. Verse 34, now when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And some of them of understanding shall fall to try them, and to purge, and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. So we understand, again, when it keeps saying this, it's a time appointed, that God is in control of these things. Verse 36. Now this is where it changes. And there's some reasons that it changes, reasons right here in the Word. But some other things that you do is you look for these things if they happened and you can't find them. Now, I did not search extensively, but I did look for some things, and everything I found, it didn't make sense. But look at this verse 36. In the first of it, it says, and the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper. Now stop right there. Nowhere in history did a king magnify himself over every god, like Antiochus Epiphanes. His god was Zeus. And if you go back, in these kings, they all had a god. There was Diana, and there was all kinds of gods that they had. But we don't have someone exalting themselves as God, who was a king, who was a ruler. We don't have that. But when will we have that? The Antichrist. That's when. So that's in the future. So if you remember, Daniel was given the dream, and it was 69 weeks plus 1. Is that right? So it was 70 weeks, and that's 70 groups of sevens. So we've got the 70th week would then be what? The last week, or the 7 years tribulation was that 70th week. Now look at the rest of that verse. And shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. Do you know what indignation means? If you look this up in the concordance, it's God's wrath. It's God's wrath. So until the indignation, God's wrath, be accomplished. For that is determined shall be done. For that is determined shall be done. That is God talking. In other words, God's the only one that is going to, what he has determined is going to be done. He's the only one that can talk that way. Now, so his indignation be accomplished. So when is God's wrath, when is it finished? The word accomplished there means finished. So when do you think that would be? That's right. The end of the tribulation, it's the Antichrist and false prophet. They're all thrown alive into the fiery pit. Right, the lake of fire. So, to me, when I read this part and was studying these things, this makes sense then that we're talking about future events now, not something that's happened in the past. Neither shall he regard, verse 37, neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. Now, I looked at some things here. It says, neither shall he regard the God of his fathers. So this sounds like it could be a Jewish person, because the God of his fathers is God. In Scripture it talks about the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and so on. But I don't think that's what it's talking about, because none of the rest of it makes sense. I think that he's simply saying that he does not regard the religious things that his father did, nor the desire of women. With our world the way it is now, I just thought maybe he didn't like girls, but I don't think that's what it's talking about either. The desire of women here, in the desire of a Jewish woman, is to be the Messiah's mother. And so what he's doing here is he's saying he doesn't have any regard for the Messiah. Do you realize the Jewish people are still looking for their Messiah? They're still looking for their Messiah. And so the desire of a woman, a Jewish woman, is to be the mother of the Messiah. And so he is disregarding the Messiah here. I think that's what he means when he says that. Nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. Now, if we turn to Revelation 13 and 19, we see the Antichrist doing these very things. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. So we see here that this is a story, or the prediction of what the Antichrist is going to be doing. And this is we can read things similar to this in Revelation. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. He shall enter also into the glorious land, that's Israel, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hands, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. That's Jordan, I believe, those places. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. And he shall plant the tabernacles of the palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. He'll come to his end, and none shall help him. Now there's a lot here, and there's a lot of talk about these different countries. And there's 7 countries that are mentioned. And so there's a lot of talk about these things, and I will tell you that I don't know a whole lot about it. And I'm not going to try to tell you what all these countries, who they represent and all of that. We'll have Mom come up and she can show you those things. But it's interesting, and what I want to do now is I want to go and find out all of these things in Revelation and see how they all come to pass and how they all do. I didn't do that, but it would be a good study to do that. Any thoughts?
You realize we get to see some of this, maybe, I don't know how much, but some, I think.
I think so too. And of course, our desire is that the Lord come now, soon. And if that's true, we're going to see these things come to pass one way or another. And if we are caught up with him, then I think we're going to be part of the way that these things come to pass. And we have that opportunity. Any other thoughts? My hope tonight, and I was wondering what I was going to do and how the Lord would do, but my hope tonight is that if this has sparked your interest, do the study that I did and find out what I found out for yourself, but then continue and go on. And of course, we have another chapter next week, so we'll look at that, and there's some things there too. But to see how all these things are going to come to pass is interesting. Praise the Lord. Sherry?